Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Ian Cunningham. I currently serve as the North Central representative to the Executive Board of the Natural Association of Conservation Districts. But I'm a conservationist. I'm currently the senior member of a 5-generation family farm near Pipestone, Minnesota. I've grown up my whole life respecting and caring for the land and for the livestock that we have on it. I'm also a local saltwater conservation district supervisor, and we will, the Minnesota team will talk about it. I'll take this first bullet, and the others will follow. We in Minnesota were one of the first to adopt the Uniform Conservation Program, and created after the creation of Soil Conservation Service in 1935, USDA managers began to search for a way to extend conservation assistance to more farmers. They believed the solution was to establish democratically organized conservation districts to lead conservation planning effort at the local level. At that time, USDA Assistant Secretary M.L. Wilson believed that in order to increase engagement, farmers had to feel they had an active role in promoting soil conservation, and if they were to accept it as a goal and ultimately a regular part of their farming operation. And I'd like to share a quote from Sam Studebaker, who was the NACD president from 1966 to 1970. And he said, soil and water conservation does not start with land treatment. It starts in the mind of the landowner. So what we do as a conservation delivery team is different than as a farmer when I purchase a crop insurance policy, or I endure a sign-up or reporting requirement with FSA. When we're talking about changing a practice or adopting a new practice on our land, which we hold very dear and we believe that we're already doing it the best we can do it takes a lot of trust. And I believe that the partnership has a better outcome when there are people who can introduce the new NRCS employee and say he or she knows her stuff. And when we have the local boards, which are our neighbors from our neighborhood, and it adds credibility and trust. Now here is, you might think this gentleman's taking a picture, but he's originating the concept of satellite imagery and drone technology. It's quite often in what we do, we always wonder, well, how could I do this better? So might not be the way that the federal government would like their employees to engage right now. And here we have a picture from 1948 where we're engaging with people who aren't farmers. These are school teachers, and there's a district board member and a local conservationist talking to school teachers about soil health. And I think that's one of the great things we can do is when we engage people that are not our typical clients to know what we're doing and to believe in it. Well, Paul, Chessa, and Raleigh might share some numbers with you that analyze the economic return on investment of what we do. They'll share some of the technical and structural things that we do to work together, but ladies and gentlemen, what we do, the product of the conservation delivery team, is often things that are worth more than money. And now I'd like to introduce Paul, who can introduce himself. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Kravloff, and I'm from Moorhead, Minnesota. I've been a SWCD supervisor since 1985, and over those years, at that time I was a farmer, and now I've been a realtor for the last 28 years, so if you need help, let me. Anyway, I just want to talk about the partnering that we've done in Minnesota over the years that has developed. And I really took to heart some of the words that you said about continuing to change with the culture and the diversity. And I think our state has done that in many ways. And the ones that I would like to talk about briefly, will be the conservation partnerships, and you can see them here pointed out. We have 5 groups that we work together with, and we have our conservation districts. We're Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. We have 87 counties, and within those counties we have 87. I said that wrong. 89 conservation districts spread throughout the state. These started in 1938, and they developed throughout the state over the years. We also have a standalone agency that developed in the 1990s called the Board of Salt and Water Resources. This is a standalone state agency. I understand there's a few others throughout the United States. This board acts as a way for legislators or legislation to appropriate money into an environmental agency, and then they bring that out to us in forms of grants to counties, watersheds, and our districts. About $45 million channels through that organization every year, that agency. So it's been very, very helpful. It keeps the grassroots approach close to the ground here with our farmers, landowners, in the projects that we have. And then, of course, going way back, as long as I was in, my father was in supervisor before, I've always known about the SCS and the NRCS as they developed into, and watched that relationship. And back in the day when it was SCS, how really they told us what to do and how it was going to be. We were the small little guys, and watch over the years we've all grown together, and the importance of leveraging each other for that relationship with the landowner, and whatnot, and also for that piece of leveraging financial ability to get practice on the ground. So I think that is working extremely well. We also have the RC&Ds that have been throughout Minnesota over the years, again, project-based. And then lastly, the last part of our group is the employees. The Minnesota Association Conservation District employees. This also came about in the 1990s, and it really has been, we'll go into further detail, but that has given us another way to have education and consistency throughout the state is getting the practices on the ground, best management practices. We have, those partnerships, if I can just back up on that a little bit one more time. The one thing about our delivery, I think, that is so important, whether it comes from the federal down or the grassroots up, is that fact that I think we're long enough established, experience, we are trusted. So when these programs come in, people can rely on what we're talking about and not really be second guessing us all the time. We've been improving and working very hardly on that technical training and certification of conservation that people have, and given us that ability to maximize, again, our abilities to get these projects on the ground in an efficient and real pragmatic way. The other thing I want to point out are 2 other things. Toward the bottom, it talks about the science base. We do, through the NRCS, through our universities, and then other training and education that comes through our organizations, we're able to give our programs based on science to know what the hope is to be, how we can meet our challenges, and then to also follow up with and have a way of determining outcomes so that we can give feedback to the federal government or the state government so we can leverage dollars for future practices. And again, it is, I believe, so good to have voluntary approach. I just can't say enough about that with the landowners feeling that they're part of this, as we are part of this all together for the greater good. We have our shared visions, values, interests. a year ago, or in 2015, we took our partnerships and we brought them together at our annual convention. We had a memorandum of agreement, the 5 groups I mentioned earlier, and that set the frame for what we were doing. It's to share our current, to show and maintain our values. We have come together and formed a cooperative working agreement between the SWCDs and the NRCS. It helps us define and understand and know our pieces. And one of those pieces I want to speak to is that in Minnesota, we're big on co-locating our offices. We are redoing many lease agreements right now as that's going on. Of our 89 districts, 69 of them are co-located, so that's about 75%. And I hope we can continue that. When the landowner and operators come in that door, this should be pretty seamless. It's a place they can come and get direction for whatever those needs are, and really not even know that there's much difference between us. And we're all in the same place. And then it'll be a little more detail in a few minutes, our operational agreements. Going around the state, DCs and the SWCD managers getting together, understanding the roles they have and how can we share our gifts and our resources together. Last, I would like to point out that through a software program the federal people have, the implant, that economic development analysis has been done, and this was created over the last couple of years, this analysis, and last year it was brought about that through our partnerships, the SWCDs, Bowser, NRCS, we implemented about $305 million worth of funds, which then has a multiplier effect of approximately 1.3, and that created economic impact to the state of about $411 million. This information was very valuable for us when we made our legislators for future funding. So I think it's a great tool to have, and and it's a way for the state to know their investment. Our taxpayers know that we're using their money the best we can and leveraging it to the greatest ability possible. So, thank you.
Well, my name is Kathy Pullman. I'm the Minnesota NRCS State Conservationist. I'd just like to add on to the implant data. This is, like Paul said, the University of Minnesota adopted this 20 years ago, and NRCS, we've had this data for 20 years. This is a big deal because, it's the Fort Worth Tech Center, Dave Goodland and other economists that have helped us input this data. And what we do is we take the state agencies' data and the individual soil and water conservation district data and we put it in. And like I said, it's very conservative, but we found this, and others may be using this, but we found it's very, very beneficial, as Paul mentioned, in leveraging those dollars. And just understanding that, it's probably closer to 600 million. That's a lot of money. So what's behind, as Ian mentioned, what's behind that money, right? So anyway, I just encourage, we're talking about modeling, and had mentioned about modeling. This is something that we have found is very, very advantageous. So Chessa is next.
Hi, I'm Chessa Fromm. I'm District Manager and also the President of the Minnesota Association of Conservation District Employees. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking to you about a couple of programs that are a little bit unique to Minnesota. The first one is our Leadership Development Institute. Every year, all of our partners get together and we open it up to our staff and our board members because developing our leadership isn't just about our staff. And they go through a 16-month course to develop their leadership, and they can focus on, each year they focus on a different topic that is current to conservation and how we're going to get conservation out there. This has been going on for about 20 years now, give or take a few years in there. That funding may have been a little short. Kathy, do you have anything you really want to focus on that?
I think it falls, I don't know if these, I just think it's a great lead-in into what we heard earlier, that as a partnership, it's a marketing, right? We need to market ourselves, we need to brand ourselves as a partnership. And how better to do that than the foundation? Because if we have our newer employees, not so much younger, but if we have our newer employees coming together and collaborating and understanding what it's about, that's it. I had an employee that had about 25 years of service in send me a picture recently, and it said, it was Fillmore County working services through, no, let me start. It said NRCS completing services through the Fillmore County. And they said, is this inappropriate? Heavens, no, it's not inappropriate. In 1935, information in the act that was passed said we, as NRCS, we deliver our services through our districts. And we want to make sure everybody knows that. So these institutes, these partnerships and leaderships, we got to grow together. Go ahead, Jessica.
So another way that we deliver leadership skills and conservation is through our technical training and certification model. Back in 2014, our partners got together with the state agency, the Board of Water, Soil Resources, and the Conservation District Employees Association, and agreed that we needed to develop a model for how we were going to get training out to our staff that was going to make everyone across the state have the same training, and everything was going to be developed or delivered uniformly across the state. So our partners agreed to contribute $1 million to this development. Then in 2015, as a group, we hired on a training coordinator for the state. And through that, we're developing core competencies, individual development plans, training teams on the area level. And each area can identify their priorities. And then from there, we go down to the individual level and we can develop these plans so that we know that the producers are getting the best possible delivery of conservation that they can.
Yeah, you can if you want to. Local working groups. We've all heard those. The policy lies in our General Manual 440, but who's the lead for local working groups? It's the conservation districts. And how long have you all been the lead? Come on, guess?
It's the beginning.
So a little history here. In 1990 was the first farm bill that we had a Title II, a conservation title. That was the first farm bill. In 1996 is when local work groups came in. So, what, about 21 years? Maybe we don't want to show hands on this, but how well are your local work groups functioning? This is the link to locally led conservation. This is critical. So for Minnesota, we're revamping it. We're jump-starting it. As an NRCS employee, when you come in to complete an application, we cannot say no to anybody. We take all applications. But guess who can prioritize and say no? Our partners. And if you read that local work group policy that we're revamping, because it says in there that we must, as the state technical chair, which is the NRCS state conservationist, we must align the priorities with the Farm Bill dollars. So if that system is broken, are we really doing the priorities in our state? So as a partnership, we want to get there. We're going to revamp it, we're going to live it, and we're going to breathe it. It's not me just talking, right? But we've had lots of talks and there's been retreats in Minnesota about locally led and what's it mean. If you Google locally led, you're going to get like 5 million hits. But what's it mean? Well, we heard from the movie what it means. And so we really believe strongly in the local work groups and how we're going to move forward with it. And I just appreciate the partners' help on it. And I know we have another part of the local work group, PMT, Chestnut.
A big part of the local work group is what we call PMT, prioritize, target, and measure. This is looking and ranking, basically prioritizing, exactly what it sounds like, what our issues are and what we're going to focus on first. What is the biggest issue that we want to accomplish and tackle right away? From there we go to targeting. We look at different at the watershed level, what we can accomplish in that watershed down to the field level. Most of the time it's a desktop review using different modeling and science. We look at the TMDLs to see where we can target, and then from there we go to measuring. We look at different models to see if we're going to have an outcome and if that can help us to reach our goal. We don't want to prioritize and target without getting an outcome and being actually able to achieve our goal over time.
I'm not a great storyteller. And as Raleigh comes up, Raleigh's our vice president, newly elected, and he's going to cover this last slide. How many went to the CTIC tour in Minnesota 2 years ago? Any show of hands? So if you remember, we were sitting there, and John, 2 summers ago, right? So John Stein, who is our EPA of Minnesota director, he just came up to the mic and he said, "Hey, Minnesota, where the women are," and everybody answered, "Strong." And he goes, and the men are good looking. And then he said, "The children are above average." And I was sitting there next to an elderly couple, and I go, "How do you know this?" I mean, they were just all repeating it. And I listen to NPR a lot, but obviously I missed the end of Garrison Keillor's monologue because everybody knows that monologue. So we've rewritten the monologue. You know, we talk about branding and different things we're doing, but we've rewritten it. This is Raleigh's portion.
Yeah, just to wrap up.
Yeah, go Raleigh.
Use your humor, Raleigh. You got it.
Well, I'd just like to, cap here, as unique as Minnesota is, we have differences within ourselves. We have, we're unique. In our state, we currently have more district employees than there are NRCS employees. I think that's unique across, I don't know if there's very many states that say that. We've grown huge in the last few years. But we have differences within that, and the challenge is to keep working together. There are some districts that think we can just do our own thing, and we don't need to work with NRCS. And one of my goals, I'm currently the vice president, is to challenge some of these districts. Well, aren't they, unless NRCS is not doing anything in your area, you need to be working with them. We are here to service landowners, and that not working together is not providing good service to your landowners. And, I've been around 30 years, I've seen a lot of changes, and things will continue to change. And with that, that's the news from Minnesota, where the conservation partnership is strong, resources are a priority, and the people and soils